When thinking about abuse and how likely it is to happen at your club, you need to understand that there are different kinds of risk. The Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse identified 4 main kinds of risk. Understanding them will help you reduce the chances of harm occurring. The first is the environment. The space where children engage with adults can affect the potential for harm and abuse to occur. Research tells us that when a child is alone with an adult, then the likelihood of abuse increases. For example, a young person alone in a car with a coach has a different risk level to a young person training with a team on a court, as there are greater opportunities for observation. Similarly, engaging a child in private conversation online or via email or text can also be high risk because, again, it is time spent alone with a child without the oversight of other adults. How to respond to environmental risk. You should have clear codes of conduct which describe appropriate behaviours. These rules should be communicated to all your stakeholders, including children and young people. Opportunities for young people to report in a child-friendly way should also be put in place. Where possible, the physical environment should be altered to allow for clear lines of sight in spaces where adults interact with children. The vulnerability of the child. There are many things that can make a child vulnerable. They include not having supportive adults in their lives, or if they're living in a household where there is domestic violence. Their age, cultural background, and cognitive ability are also factors. Sometimes, children and young people with no obvious vulnerability may also be targeted. They include those working towards elite-level sport who feel unable to speak up about abuse by their coach because they feel the coach is vital to their success. Having an environment where adults regularly berate or verbally abuse children will create a culture where the children become more susceptible to harm because abusive behaviour has become a normal part of their engagement with your club. A common factor in all of these scenarios is that children and young people can face challenges in speaking up. How to respond to vulnerability risk. You should create an environment where all children and young people are encouraged to have a voice and be listened to and be believed. Propensity of the adult to abuse. It's difficult to think anyone at your club would abuse a child. You know these people. You might be friends with them. However, there is no typical offender when it comes to abuse. Many children are abused by someone they know, someone who they and other adults trust. When considering whether an adult would harm a child sexually, we should refer to the research about different kinds of offenders. There are determined offenders, opportunistic offenders, and situational offenders. Determined offenders are what we often refer to as pedophiles. They have a sexual interest in children and can be quite skilled at disguising their behaviour and manipulating others. Opportunistic offenders wouldn't normally abuse children, but if an opportunity to offend against the child presents itself, and a club has poor child-safe practices, they will weigh up their options. If they feel the perceived benefit outweighs the chance of being caught, they're more likely to abuse a child. Situational offenders typically have no interest in children sexually, but because of their regular and close proximity to them, the lines of appropriate behaviour become blurred. How to respond to propensity risk. Research shows that when a club has appropriate child-safe strategies in place, such as codes of conduct, child-safe policies and procedures, a strong culture of child-safe leadership and of valuing children, the likelihood of offenders succeeding is reduced, particularly opportunistic and situational offenders. Organisational risk. Clubs that don't value children and instead focus on success. Those with a winning-at-all-costs mentality, for example, are more likely to be places where harm occurs. Similarly, clubs that fail to prioritise having robust policies and procedures in place, or which don't use the child-safe standards, are more likely to be places where children are harmed. How to respond to organisational risk. Clubs need to prioritise the safety of children. They need to have child-safe practices in place so that all adults know how to identify, prevent, and respond to harm if it occurs. Remember, you can address all 4 kinds of risk if you apply the Child Safe Standards. For more information on the standards and for free tools and resources, visit www.ocg.nsw.gov.au today.